All right, so have you guys ever heard of this thing, the Mandela Effect? It's kind of wild.
Sounds ominous. What is it?
Okay, so picture Darth Vader, right?
Mm.
Big, bad Sith Lord looming over Luke Skywalker. And he says, Luke, I am your father.
Chills. Right.
Yeah. Classic movie moment, except he never actually said that. It's
Yeah.
no, I am your father. But tons of people, I mean, TONS remember it the other way. That's the Mandela Effect in a nutshell. Like we all have this shared memory that's just wrong, you know?
Oh, wow. I see what you mean. Yeah, I can see how that would be a bit unsettling.
It's super interesting, though, and we got a bunch of articles from you guys wanting to deep dive into it.
It's definitely more than just regular forgetfulness. When so many people share the same wrong memory, it makes you wonder what's going on.
Right. It's like, did we all just collectively imagine a different reality?
And that's exactly what makes it so fascinating. The term actually comes from this whole shared memory of Nelson Mandela dying in prison in the 80s.
Wait, really? I never knew that.
Yep. Now, we know Nelson Mandela lived until 2013, but a whole bunch of people clearly remember news coverage of his funeral way back when.
That's crazy. And then there's the whole Berenstain Bears thing.
Ah, yes, the classic Berenstain versus Berenstain debate.
Drove me nuts as a kid. I swear it was Berenstein with an E.
Right. So many people have that same memory. It's like those childhood books just decided to switch spellings at some point.
Right. And don't even get me started on the Monopoly Man. I always thought he had a monocle.
These examples are super interesting, but the Mandela effect, it's not just these funny little memory lapses. It makes you wonder, what's happening in our brains?
That's the million-dollar question. Some people go all in on those wild theories. Parallel universes, time travel.
Imagine just for a second that parallel universes exist, each one slightly different from our own. Maybe in one universe, the Berenstain Bears spelling is right, and in another, it's Berenstain, like we know it.
Whoa, okay, that one kind of breaks my brain a little. So are we, like, glimpsing those other realities through these memory glitches?
It's a cool thought experiment, right? And then there's the whole time travel idea. What if someone went back in time and accidentally changed something, and that created these ripples in our memories?
So, like, cosmic butterfly effect. Someone steps on a butterfly in the past, and boom, now the Berenstain Bears have a different spelling.
Exactly. And of course, there's always the simulation hypothesis, the idea that we're all living in a giant computer program. Maybe the Mandela effect is just a glitch in the system.
Like someone hit Control-Alt-Delete on reality, and now we're living in the aftermath.
As cool as those theories are, they're more like science fiction than actual science.
So maybe we're not hopping between universes, but what does science have to say about all this? Are our brains really that glitchy? So our brains aren't like hard drives storing perfect copies of everything, huh?
Not quite. They're more like, well, imagine a giant game of telephone.
Okay, I'm intrigued. How so?
Every time you remember something, it's like you're whispering that memory to the next person in line. And they whisper it to the next, and so on.
And things get a little jumbled along the way.
Exactly. Details get lost, added, or just plain mixed up. By the time it gets back to you, it might not be quite the same.
That makes sense. So it's not so much that we're intentionally misremembering things. Our brains are just trying to piece together a story from what they've held on to.
Exactly, and that's where things get really interesting. See, our brains, they hate gaps in the story.
Don't we all?
So what do? They fill them in. It's called confabulation.
Confabulation. Sounds fancy.
It basically means our brains make stuff up to keep the story going, even if those made-up parts weren't really there in the first place.
So it's like our brains are writing their own fan fiction about our lives, and we don't even realize it.
Pretty much. And here's the thing. Those fabricated details, they can feel just as real, just as vivid as actual memories.
No wonder it's so hard to tell the difference sometimes. But what about outside influences? Like, if everyone around you keeps saying the Monopoly Man had a monocle, even if he didn't, could that actually change your memory of it?
Absolutely. It's called suggestibility. Our memories are surprisingly easily influenced by what we hear, see, or even just imagine.
So, like, if someone repeats something often enough, even if it's not true, it can start to feel like our own memory.
Exactly. Our brains are always absorbing information, trying to make sense of the world around us. And sometimes that means incorporating incorrect information into our own personal narratives.
That's kind of scary, actually. It makes you realize how important it is to be careful about the information we consume.
It really does. Just because something is repeated often or shared by a lot of people doesn't mean it's true. That's why it's so important to be a critical thinker, especially these days.
So how do we do that? How do we become more aware of these memory biases and avoid falling into those traps. So how do we become like memory detectives? How do we sort out the real memories from the fake ones?
It's all about thinking critically. Don't just take everything at face value.
Easier said than done, right?
True. But think of it like this. Anytime you come across something surprising, something that makes you go, huh, really? That's your cue.
My cue to do what?
To dig a little deeper, ask yourself, where did I hear this? Is this a reliable source?
So like double checking before I share something online.
Exactly. Look for evidence. Are other reputable sources saying the same thing? Or is it just one random article?
Okay, so check your sources.
Yeah.
Got it. Anything else?
It's also good to be aware of your own biases. We all have them, right? And sometimes those biases can color how we remember things.
You mean like if I really, really want the Monopoly Man to have a monocle, I might misremember him having one.
It's possible. Our brains love to create a good story, so sometimes they'll tweak memories to fit the narrative we've built in our heads.
Wow, our brains are sneaky little things, aren't they?
They are. But that's what makes them so fascinating. It's not always about having a perfect memory. It's about recognizing that our memories are fluid, they change over time, and that's okay?
So the Mandela Effect, it's not necessarily a bad thing?
Not at all. It's a reminder that our brains are constantly working, making sense of the world. And sometimes they get things a little mixed up. But that's part of what makes us human, right?
That's a good point. It's about embracing the quirks of our own minds. Well, that was a trip. I feel like I've learned a lot about how our memories work, even if it means questioning everything I thought I knew.
That's the spirit. And remember, a little healthy skepticism can go a long way.
Totally agree. So next time you hear about the Mandela Effect, don't freak out. Just take a breath, channel your inner detective, and enjoy the ride. And that's a wrap on this deep dive into the Mandela Effect. Thanks for joining us as we explore the wild world of memory and the importance of critical thinking. Until next time, stay curious. Okay, let's unpack a couple of seriously intriguing stories that, let's be honest, sound like they came straight out of some kind of sci-fi flick marathon. The Philadelphia Experiment and the Mandela Effect.
Oh, absolutely. They both have that what-if thing about them that really captures the imagination, don't they?
Totally. I mean, on the one hand, we've got tales of a Navy destroyer, the USS Eldridge, supposedly vanishing into thin air back in '43, and then...
And you fast forward to the internet age, and bam, suddenly everyone and their uncle is convinced Nelson Mandela died way before he actually did.
Exactly. And it makes you wonder, are these two mysteries actually connected somehow?
That's what we're here to explore, right? To see if there are any threads linking these two seemingly separate but equally strange phenomena. Let's start with the Philadelphia experiment. The main idea is that back in October 1943, the U.S. Navy was experimenting with making the Eldridge invisible. Not just to radar, but like completely invisible.
Wait, seriously. They wanted to make an entire ship disappear. What were they even thinking?
Supposedly, the goal was to win World War II with some seriously next-level, almost Star Trek-sounding tech.
Wow. Okay, so that's a pretty big goal. But did they actually manage to cloak this destroyer?
Well, that's the million-dollar question, right? Whether they really achieved invisibility is still a huge debate. But it gets even weirder, the story goes, that the Eldridge didn't just disappear, it teleported. Like, popped up in Norfolk, Virginia for a bit, and then zipped right back to Philly.
Teleportation. Okay, now that's just showing off. But what about the sailors on board during all this disappearing and teleporting? Were there any side effects from this whole thing?
Yeah, that's where the story takes a bit of a dark turn. There are these chilling reports about crew members getting fused with the ship's metal, others going completely insane, and some just vanishing altogether.
Yikes, that's the stuff of nightmares right there. It's no wonder this story grabbed people's attention. But let's be real for a second. Did the Navy ever actually own up to this experiment happening?
Officially. No way. They deny the whole thing ever went down. They say it never happened, and a lot of historians tend to agree. Their take is that it's just a bunch of wartime rumors, maybe some misunderstandings about old Navy documents, and, well, people love a good story.
So basically, they're calling it a hoax. Case closed.
Well, not so fast. You got to remember, this was the 1940s, a time of some seriously rapid technological advancement, especially in areas like radar and sonar. So even if teleporting a ship seems like pure fantasy, the idea of, messing with electromagnetic fields to some degree wasn't totally out there.
Yeah, exactly. Like, even if the Philadelphia experiment never actually happened the way some people claim, the fact that we can even imagine it, right, says something about the kind of wild scientific advancements happening back then. But let's shift gears a bit to something that hits a little closer to home for most folks. The Mandela Effect. Have you ever had one of those moments where you could swear up and down that something happened a certain way, but then everyone else is telling you, nope, you're misremembering? Well, the Mandela effect basically takes that feeling and dials it up to 11.
Oh, tell me about it. I still can't get over that whole Luke, I am your father thing, not actually being how that line goes in Star Wars. I mean, for years I would have bet money that's what Darth Vader said. It's the perfect example. And that's the essence of the Mandela effect, right? It's
Uh-huh.
a whole bunch of people sharing the same crystal clear memory, except it just happens to be wrong.
Right.
The term itself first popped up online back in the late 2000s, thanks to a blogger named Fiona Broom.
Fiona Broom, right.
Hmm.
She's the one who was positive that Nelson Mandela had died in prison back in the 80s, right?
That's the one. And the really interesting thing is that after she wrote about it, tons of other people came forward saying they had that exact same false memory. It was like this collective, hold on a minute, what moment happening all over the internet. And it wasn't just about Mandela. People started reporting these same kinds of weird shared memories about all sorts of things. Famous movie quotes, product names, you name it.
So how do we even begin to explain this? Are we really talking about alternate realities here? Like, is this some kind of matrix glitch situation? Or is there, like, a more down-to-earth explanation for all of this?
Well, that's the million-dollar question, isn't it? The Mandela effect definitely has this way of making you question the very fabric of reality. Like, if our memories can be this messed up, then what can we actually trust, right? But before we jump to parallel universes and all that, there are actually a few very human explanations that we should consider.
So you're saying this could all be in our heads, which honestly is kind of a letdown, but also, like, a bit of a relief at the same time.
Right. And psychologists actually have a name for this: confabulation. Basically, it's our brains trying to be helpful, I guess, by filling in gaps in our memories, even if that means making stuff up along the way. And get this, the craziest part is that these made-up details, they can feel just as real as actual memories.
Wow, that is seriously trippy. So are we saying then the Mandela effect could just be a global case of our brains playing tricks on us? That's both fascinating and kind of unsettling, to be honest.
Absolutely. It really makes you think twice about how much of what we perceive as reality is actually just our brains trying to make sense of a very complex world. But here's where things get even more interesting. What if there's a connection back to the Philadelphia experiment?
Okay.
What if, even if we dismiss the whole teleportation aspect, what if that experiment somehow, even in some small way, messed with time itself?
Okay, I see where you're going with this. You're thinking maybe those supposed ripples in time from the Eldridge, maybe they could explain the Mandela effect. Like they're somehow messing with our memories or something.
Exactly. Think of time like a fluid, interconnected sort of web.
Okay.
What if the Philadelphia experiment, if it did happen, what if it created these ripples or disturbances in that web? Maybe those disturbances are what create these echoes or overlaps between different timelines, maybe even different realities altogether.
Hold on. Are you suggesting that instead of one fixed timeline, there might be multiple timelines all happening at the same time? Is that even a thing? Like, do the scientists actually take that seriously?
I know it sounds like something straight out of Doctor Who, but the idea of a multiverse, with multiple parallel universes existing simultaneously, it's actually a hot topic in physics these days. String theory, quantum mechanics, these all seem to allow for the possibility of these realities existing side by side, maybe even interacting with each other in ways we don't fully understand.
Okay, so in this multiverse scenario, the Mandela effect, it could be explained by our consciousness kind of jumping between these slightly different realities. Like, we remember things from one timeline, but then we shift to another where those memories don't quite fit anymore.
Precisely. It's a mind-blowing concept, and while sure we don't have any hard evidence to prove it or disprove it, the sheer possibility is, wow, incredibly intriguing, isn't it? It really opens up these huge questions about the very nature of reality and our place in it.
Whoa, that's a lot to process. So we're saying there's a chance the Mandela effect isn't just like our brains making stuff up, but maybe like echoes from other realities bleeding through into our own. That's some seriously next level stuff.
It really is. And you know what? It makes you wonder what other glitches might be happening all around us that we don't even notice. Like those times you walk into a room and you just feel like you've walked into the wrong room, or maybe you swear you've had the exact same conversation before.
Okay.
Maybe those aren't just, senior moments, but maybe they're actually these tiny little glimpses into other versions of our lives.
Okay, now you're just messing with me. But I mean, seriously, if we entertain this whole multiverse idea for a second, does that mean there's like A version of me out there somewhere who actually remembers the Philadelphia experiment happening.
Yeah.
Or like a timeline where the Mandela Effect is just, you know, a normal Tuesday.
No, wouldn't that be something? It's
Yeah,
definitely fun to think about. And hey, who knows, right? Maybe in the grand, crazy scheme of the cosmos, anything is possible. But, even if we bring it back down to earth for a second, the fact that we're even having this conversation is pretty amazing in itself, I think.
you're absolutely right about that. We've gone from a disappearing Navy destroyer to faulty memories to the possibility of infinite realities all in one go. What stands out to you as the most, I don't know, the most mind-blowing part of all of this?
For me, it's not so much about whether or not the Philadelphia experiment or the Mandela effect are like literally true. It's more about what they tell us about ourselves, about our human need to believe in something beyond the everyday, something bigger than ourselves. Like we're drawn to mysteries, to the unexplained, to the impossible even. And hey, maybe, just maybe, those possibilities are a lot closer than we think.
Maybe they are.
Yeah.
Maybe we just need to know where to look. Well, that was definitely a wild ride. Big thanks to you for joining me on this deep dive into the unknown. And for everyone listening, keep your eyes peeled for those Mandela moments in your own lives, yeah? That weird feeling that something's just a little bit off. Maybe it's just your brain playing tricks. Or maybe, just maybe, it's a tiny little peek into another reality. Until next time, keep exploring and never, ever stop questioning what you think you know.